This is Jim with Harvest Harmonics, and I want to welcome you to once again to Innovations in Agriculture. And today I have a very special event. I have actually something I want to communicate to you that's very important, and that is fertilizer costs. Okay. For those of you guys who don't know, fertilizer is, let me change a second. Sorry. Seem to be getting a little feedback here. Sorry. But let me get back to this. So, fertilizer costs. That's what we're talking about today on the Innovations in Agriculture. And why am I talking about fertilizer costs? Because unless you are living in a cave somewhere, or you have nothing to do with agriculture, or you just maybe you're just coming out of the winter doldrums and you haven't even thought about your crops yet this year, you've probably already seen dramatic increases in fertilizer costs. In fact, every farmer I'm talking to is saying 50%, 100%, 200%, 300% increases in input costs, in fertilizer costs. Now, the interesting thing is that all of this increase in fertilizer costs happened because of what happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when the COVID situation hit, the entire world lost its mind, especially the leadership and the governments of the world lost their mind and decided to shut everything down completely. Now, I'm not going to go into the political aspects of whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, but the reality is when you shut down the entire world's economy, it has prolonged effects. It's not just that people aren't working during that 6 months or year or whatever. It's the fact that all those supply chains that are continuously running 24/7 around the world are also stopped for 6 months. And you can't just like start them back up again, right? It takes time for those things to get rolling again. And now here we are 2 years later with those supply chain issues already still affecting us. And fertilizer costs in the last year alone, in fact, in the last 6 months, has gone up literally 200 to 300% just because of transportation costs. I'm not even talking about what's happening now in Russia. I'll get to that in a second. But I'm talking just because of transportation costs, we're seeing the cost of fertilizer and pesticides and other inputs go up 200 to 300% just in the last 6 months. And so, can you imagine trying to run a business, any business, where you all of a sudden your supply cost doubles or triples? I mean, imagine if you're running a McDonald's somewhere and all of a sudden the cost of Big Macs triples. I mean, and you can't just necessarily pass that along to the consumer. Although, if you've been to the grocery store lately, I guarantee you've seen that a lot of those costs are being transferred. Believe me, and a lot of those extra fuel costs and extra transport costs have hit the supermarkets too. So we're already paying more. But for farmers, you're looking at now the input cost tripled. Your revenue is not necessarily tripling. So what are you going to do? Are you and I've been asking that question to farmers around the world, and especially here in the United States. I've been asking, what are you guys going to do when fertilizer's tripled? What are you guys going to do this year? What if the cost of your product doesn't triple also? How are you going to make a living? And a lot of them are saying, I don't know. A lot of them are saying, I really have no solution. I don't know if I can even grow a crop this year. I don't know if it makes sense to even just let my land stay fallow. I mean, it literally, when you factor in the labor cost and the seed cost and all the chemical costs and all these things that go into making the crops, by the time they're looking at it'd be better off just to not plant anything. I've had actually 4 or 5 growers just in the last couple of weeks tell me I'm not even going to grow this year. And these are like almond growers, right? They're perennial tree growers. So basically, they're saying, look, we're just going to let the trees do what they do. We're not going to fertilize. We're not going to water. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to hope that the trees survive until next year when maybe I can make it a profitable crop. Now, from my standpoint, I look at this and I just get angry. I'm like, are you guys telling me that you're not going to grow a crop? Are you guys telling me that you guys aren't going to do what you're basically doing for a living? You're just going to drop it for a year? And they're saying, yeah. And I say, well, why don't you use my technology? Because that's the whole reason I got into this business. I wanted to help farmers grow more profitably. But in situations like this, where there's a catastrophe, a worldwide catastrophe, that could literally eliminate the food supply. And believe it or not, Joe Biden, and I'm getting to this now, Joe Biden just earlier this week said there could be global food shortages just based upon what's happened in Russia and the Ukraine in the last 2 months now. And that's just based upon if everything stopped right now and they went back. They're talking about to the end of the year having dramatic food shortages. Now, the reason why he's saying that is because a lot of fertilizer, urea and potash and other types of main line fertilizers come out of Russia, especially for the European Union, for the Middle East, and for certain areas in that region. They depend upon Russia for their fertilizer. And now that the whole world is embargoing Russia and putting these sanctions in because Russia attacked Ukraine, Now all these countries are not going to be able to get the fertilizer they need to grow their crops. And so what's going to happen? So of course, Joe Biden, being the doddering idiot, now pardon my French, the doddering idiot that he is, says, well, we're all just going to have food shortages, so we better prepare for the fact that you may not have food on your plate later this year. I don't know about you, but I really don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate the fact that the thought that me and my sons and my wife are not going to have food on our table. Now, this may or may not affect America, but it's going to affect a lot of families around the world. And my wife's family happens to be from Turkey. And of course, that's right in that area where they really need that production. And I don't want to know that my in-laws may not have food on their plates for this year just because of some geopolitical situation. So here's the bottom line. Here's what we need to do about this. Okay. We need to get more efficient on our farms. If this is not a wake up call, I don't know what is, guys, because we can't continue to do the same things in the same way and expect to get the same result. I mean, it's just not going to work anymore. Imagine something so simple as a virus, which at the end of the day didn't necessarily kill everybody. It just killed a relatively small percentage of people, right? But it caused the whole world to go into a panic. And now you follow that up with the geopolitical problem that's happening in Russia right now. And all of a sudden, the whole fertilizer supply. And now we're starting to look at how fragile our food chain really is and how we really have to look at our operations and get super efficient at it. Because if we don't, we could die. And I'm not talking about just you might go out of business. I mean, like people could literally die. Think about that. I'm not talking about poor third world countries, where they're already having famine. I'm talking about like industrialized nations where middle class people may have no food to eat. I mean, just think about that for a second. That is a huge problem. That is a catastrophe. That's probably could be a lot worse even than the pandemic, believe it or not. So the question, of course, becomes is from an action standpoint, what do we do about it? What are you going to do as a farmer, even if you don't have fertilizer shortages and you're just trying to look at scratch your head and figure out how am I going to eat that doubling or tripling of my supply cost? And how am I going to stay in business? How am I going to make a profit this year when my supply cost just went through the roof? Or if you're in one of these other regions, if you happen to be catching this broadcast in, let's say, that Europe or the Middle East or other areas that depend upon, these supplies from Russia and these other countries, what are you going to do about this? You can't just keep doing it the same way you've always been doing. You have to change something. You have to get more efficient in your operation, and you have to grow your crops with the most efficient way possible. So the question becomes, how do you do that? Well, I've been promoting our Kimonos plant booster, but I'm not just promoting a product here, guys. I'm promoting the future of agriculture because the situation that the product that we have and the technology that powers it is a giant leap forward in terms of how we grow food. It's going to make our food much healthier, much higher quality, improve the shelf life, and reduce our need and dependence for all these chemical solutions. That, of course, is the reason why we're in this problem, right? So if you can imagine using 30%, 50%, even 80 or 90% less fertilizer and still getting more yield than you're getting now, then from a bare minimum perspective, you should be looking at this and salivating over the improvements and profitability for your farm. But if you're in one of these regions that's going to be severely affected and possibly not even being able to grow enough food to feed the populations, this is going to be super critical for you to pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. Because this technology, which is called the Kimonos Plant Booster technology, could very well be your salvation and the salvation of the people that you're feeding with your products. So I want to show this with you. And please, if you have questions along the way, type them in the comments. I want to make sure you fully understand how this works. And I want to make sure you fully understand the value of this technology I'm about to show you. Because it's not just a matter of making more money or doing something that would be nice for the world. It's becoming a mission critical thing that we all need to be doing our part to make sure that our farms and our operations are as efficient as possible so that you can survive as a business owner and so that the people who depend upon the food that you produce can survive also. So let's just jump in and let me show you what this is all about. So again, this is the future of farming today. This is not sugarcoating it. It's not a marketing slogan. This is the future. This is how farming is going to be done in the next 5 to 10 years. And the Kimonos Plant Booster is, of course, sold by us here at Harvest Harmonics. We are the worldwide distributor, but our mission has always been to help farmers grow healthier, better quality crops with lower costs and lower inputs to improve the environment and improve the quality of food around the world. So our technology is not chemicals. I want to stress this very heavily. We always get confused with chemicals, like, well, how much do I have to spray? How much chemicals do you use? Our product is not a chemical, and that's why our product is so innovative. Our product is an irrigation device that uses the laws of physics to directly stimulate the metabolism and specifically photosynthesis in plants. And when you can do that, you can really make those plants super efficient at utilizing the water and nutrients that you have, and you reduce the need for all these expensive fertilizers that, of course, now we're finding out could be not even available, even if you wanted to use these. So, just to kind of break this down and how this works from a plant physiology standpoint, we've studied the cells of plants and multiple different organisms. And Mr. Baumelli, the inventor of this technology, discovered that healthy cells of the same type operate at a very specific frequency pattern. Now, all cells, for example, in a plant, all root cells have the same frequency pattern. All cells in the stem of a plant or a tree have the same type of cell and will have the same frequency pattern. And all chloroplasts in the leaves, those little green cells that actually make photosynthesis possible, they all operate at the same frequency. However, when the plant or cell is unhealthy, those frequency patterns will be misaligned and misadjusted. Now, the analogy that I typically give is, imagine the human heart. A human heart is composed of hundreds of millions of individual cells, right? And when all of those cells are operating at the same frequency pattern, then all of those work together as one big unit or one heart, and that heart will work together and it will pump blood and it will function properly. But what happens when all those 100 million cells start to operate at their own frequency and they all get out of alignment with each other? Well, the answer is the heart no longer can function as a heart. It no longer pumps blood. And that's why they give you the defibrillators and say clear, and they actually shock the heart to stop it so that all the cells basically stop and they reset and they start operating at the same frequencies again. Well, in the case of plants, we've studied thousands of different varieties of plants, and we've done hundreds and hundreds, or maybe even tens of thousands of experiments. And we've discovered, or I should say, Mr. Baumelli, the inventor of this technology, discovered over 3,000 unique frequency patterns that are associated with the biological processes of photosynthesis in plants. Now, Mr. Ramelli started off as a medical researcher, and he discovered that the common denominator of human illness was, of course, poor nutrition and poor water quality. So he spent the next 20 years of his life studying plant physiology in an effort to help reduce chemical usage and improve a plant's physiology so that it can get super efficient at utilizing the nutrients that are available to it. So, in studying hundreds of different varieties of plants, from flowers to grasses to row crops to trees, Mr. Braumelli discovered that the processes associated with photosynthesis were consistent across all plant types. And of course, we represent that by a nice simple sine wave here. But when the plants are under stress, and in this case, a heat stress for the sunflower, again, the biological systems are all disaligned and misaligned. So, what we've done here is oops, my picture just disappeared there. Sorry about that. But what we've done here is we take the healthy frequencies and we give them to the unhealthy or stressed plants or normal plants. When we do that, we enhance the plant's ability to absorb water and nutrients and utilize them efficiently to produce the maximum amount of growth and fruit and vegetable production for the given resources in the given climate. Now, our system is very simply an irrigation device. It is a very complex system and very complicated in terms of all the different things that our system can do for all the aspects of plant physiology. But the simplicity of it is, our product is a simple irrigation device that you install into your irrigation system. And every time you irrigate your crops, our system is going to send signals into the water that enhances and retunes the metabolism of plants so that the plants are as efficient as possible. When people ask us, well, where do I install this? And we say, anywhere you want results. If you want to try this on a small area of your farm just to prove to yourself that this technology really does everything we say it does, put it on a small area of your farm. If you want to put it on a large field and do the whole field and really take advantage of our system, we have systems that can go all the way up to 2,600 gallons a minute and cover 200 acres at a time. Now, the benefits of Kimonos Plant Booster is essentially improving photosynthesis in plants, as I mentioned, and improving soil health, which we'll get to in a second. With better photosynthesis efficiency, we're seeing faster, more vigorous growth rate, better fruits and vegetable production, and of course, better quality as well. Now, the Kimonos Plant Booster will prevent the predicted food shortages. Now, how is it going to do that? Well, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, President Biden went on national TV and stated that America and many other countries could face food shortages in 2022 because of lack of fertilizer. And of course, with the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, these food shortages could get worse and worse and worse the longer this conflict goes. Now, the Kimonos plant booster improves crop yields, it improves plant health, it improves nutrient density, it improves overall quality, and a lot more effects as well, while significantly reducing the need for fertilizers, agrochemicals, and water. So, essentially, what we're doing with this is making the plants and the farm super efficient so that it can produce more produce, more food in a smaller area with smaller amounts of inputs than ever before. And of course, that's going to make this potential food shortage much, much less of a danger. Now, with the Kiminasi plant booster, you don't need all these expensive fertilizers. You don't need a lot of pesticides. You don't need fungicides. In fact, I talked with a couple of gentlemen today in both South Africa and in Turkey, and they both agree with me. They said, look, if you can make the plants healthy, you don't need to spray insecticides. The bugs will not attack healthy plants. And of course, we've seen that on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of experiments that we've done over the last 2 years. Insects just avoid the Kiminasi fields because their plants are so healthy. Now, let's take a look at some examples of where we're able to reduce the fertilizer usage, just to show you that we've actually proven this many times. Now, in several examples, we've seen reductions by 50% and sometimes even 100%, meaning the farmer didn't even fertilize the fields that he had our system on, and they still produced not only more fruits and vegetables than the fertilized fields, but they also produced better quality as well. So the first example here was a corn trial that we did here in Colombia, and we saw a 100% reduction in fertilizer usage. Again, we didn't fertilize the Kiminasi field. We had a 50% less water use and a 100% increase in corn production, with 583% increased forage for yield for cattle. Now, of course, this is feed corn, so they're taking the corn itself and they're grinding it up, and they're also taking the green matter and using that for feed as well. Now, here on India, this was done actually a couple of years ago. This was done with the 100% reduction in fertilizer and a 33% increase in yield on lentils India, excuse me. Now, here in India, the farmer produced 30 kilograms more per hectare versus his standard of 90. So he basically increased by 30%. This farmer in Washington basically saw a 100% reduction in fertilizer, so he didn't fertilize these grapevines, and he still saw an increase in Brix rating. He saw a very high amount of production, but he also saw a 5 or 6 point increase in Brix rating. So we got higher Brix with no fertilizer. Imagine that. This plum farmer in California saw a 67%. He actually didn't fertilize his fields, and he ran into a situation where the plums looked like they weren't going to get large enough or get sweet enough for him to actually harvest them. And in only 3 weeks of application, we brought the size of these plums up to full size, and we increased the overall Brix rating 5 points higher than he's ever seen on his farm. On this flower farm, we saw a 50% reduction in fertilizer usage and improved vigor of flowers in Ecuador. Now, it's very interesting because this particular farmer refused to actually provide us the data because he wanted to get the whole market in Ecuador. He wanted to basically have all the flower market in Ecuador. So he kept buying our technology every single month, every single month, every single month. He kept placing orders for more and more and more of our technology. And we said, well, what kind of results are you getting? If you're buying this every month, you must be getting amazing results. And he did say, well, I'm using a lot less fertilizer. I can get these flowers to where they need to be. I can use half as much fertilizer, and I'm still getting really, really good flower production. And so I don't need to use as much input. So yeah, I'm trying to get this on every farm I can get this to. And we said, great, send us the data. He said, no, I don't want to send you the data. I don't want all of my competitors to get this information. And sometimes you run into that. Sometimes you run into farmers that are looking at as this as a competition, and they just want to get a leg up. Well, more power to him as far as I'm concerned, because if he's the one who's jumping on board and seeing this technology and using it and seeing the results, of course, as an innovator, he has the right to some degree to having a competitive advantage. Now, the reason I'm promoting this, of course, here on this broadcast is because I don't want just one farmer using this. I want every farmer to have access to this. I want every farmer to jump on board and get results with this. So I'm promoting this to everybody. So hopefully you guys seeing this will be able to give us a call or send us an email. In fact, I'll put my phone number here. You can give us a call here. Write this down and give us a call after this broadcast. We'd be happy to work with you and do a cost benefit to show you how much money you're going to make with this, and also show you how much we would anticipate you can actually reduce your fertilizer and other input costs. But we have more examples here. Let me show you a couple more examples where we're reducing this. This was a reduction of fertilizer and a 30% increase in yield. Now, this was in Washington again. and he reduces fertilizer usage by I believe about 20%. And yet even with the reduction in fertilizer, he got an extra 30% over his normal production. So huge differences there. Another couple of things we see is, and people sometimes ask us, well, how is this working that you can use a signaling system that actually reduces fertilizer usage? To really understand why plants need fertilization, why you need to keep adding nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium and all these other nutrients to the soil, you have to understand that the plants are biologically programmed to use a certain amount of nutrients, right? However, because of weather fluctuations, because of cloudy weather, because of heat stress, because of cold snaps and frost, because of insects and funguses and all these different environmental factors that we're always fighting every year, because of all these external factors, the plant's efficiency at utilizing the resources that it has starts to drop, and it drops significantly. In fact, I theorize, based upon all the results that I've seen and the people that I've talked to, that the plants in an average season, not even a bad season, but just an average season, plants are probably losing 20 to 30% of the available energy they could be producing through photosynthesis just because of these different weather fluctuations. It's almost like if you're driving a car, if you use like car mileage, right? On a highway, you might get 30 or 40 miles per gallon, but in the city, you might only get 20 miles per gallon. And the reason you get such less efficiency in the cities because you're starting, you're stopping, you're starting, you're stopping, you're starting, you're stopping, right? And that start and stop is actually wasting a lot of energy for your car. Well, the same thing happens in photosynthesis when you have weather fluctuations, right? If it starts to get hot and the plants are closing the stomata in their leaves, they now don't have the carbon dioxide they need to make that photosynthesis reaction happen efficiently. And now, even though the plant has enough nitrogen or phosphorus, it doesn't have the carbon, it doesn't have the CO2 that it needs, and therefore it can't translate all of those compounds into glucose, which it needs for fruit production. And so you wind up losing a lot of energy. You might lose 20, 30, 50% of the energy that you could have if the plant's metabolism was operating at optimum state. So we are just continuing to maintain that optimum metabolism throughout the season, no matter what's happening. And because of that, we're reclaiming the plant's ability to generate energy, especially in situations where you have a lot of variability in weather or insects or other types of things. Now, the CEC is also another important component of this. Now, the question here is, how does CEC, or cation ion exchange capacity of the soil, affect fertilizer use? Well, a high soil CEC allows for negatively charged clay and organic matter to attract mineral nutrient cations, basically positively charged ions. So, would you look at the calcium, magnesium, potassium, these types of positive ions, if the CEC has the ability to exchange these ions and make them into usable forms so that the plant can breathe and get what it needs. Plants need the mineral nutrient cations, like I just mentioned, and if they're retained in the soil, they will survive and grow. If they're not in the soil, if those types of cations leach out of the soil, you're going to have problems, and you're going to need to supplement that with extra fertility, meaning extra fertilizer. So the mineral nutrient cations that are attached to soil particles are still available to plants, but they're prevented from leaching out of the soil. But when you have a high CEC, now if you have a sandy type soil or low CEC type soil, you're going to have problems with that because those minerals and those nutrients are going to leach out of the soil. So you're just adding these nutrients and they're just sucking right out of the soil. You're adding nutrients and they're sucking right out of the soil. And so you're probably wasting 60, 70, 80% of the fertilizer you're actually using because the plants aren't even absorbing it. So stop and think for a second. Like if you were watching the beginning of this presentation and you thought to yourself, there's no way they can reduce fertilizer usage by 50% or 70% or 100%. That's impossible. It is possible. In fact, it makes complete sense because when you can improve CEC in the soil and when you can improve the plant's efficiency at utilizing those nutrients, then it can maximize the efficiency of production, and you don't need to add tons and tons and tons of fertilizer. You just don't need to. And it will also improve the efficiency of nutrient absorption, like I mentioned. So not only is it improving the CEC in the soil itself, it's also improved the plant's ability to absorb and utilize those nutrients more efficiently. Now, here's an example of one soil test we did. This was actually back in our R&D phase, where we actually started with the CEC. We did a side-by-side comparison, control versus treated, and the whole soil started out at 18.3 CEC. So it was a fairly high CEC rating in the soil to begin with. Now, after we ran an 8-week trial, we noticed that the Kimonos field increased the CEC rating from 18.3 to 21.9. So we saw an increase in our field, whereas the control decreased down to 13.3. So overall, it was a 65% differential there. And you can see also in the minerals here available in the soil, there was a lot more minerals available versus control. So you had more boron, more zinc, more manganese, slightly more iron, and everything else. So you had a lot more minerals left in the soil. In other words, the plants were more efficient at utilizing the minerals in the soil, and there was more left over after we ran this experiment than before. So huge differences there. So we've got a lot of examples here. Reduction in water use, that we actually reduced water by 65%, 50%, 25%, 40%. We see significant decreases in water usage on a number of farms as well. Again, we're just making those plants in that soil more efficient at utilizing and retaining water so that you don't need to add as much. And that may not have anything to do with the current fertilizer usage, but again, the less water usage, especially if you're in a drought environment, will definitely help you as well. This was an example where we saw a 65% reduction on this almond grove because of a soil compaction issue that we helped reduce and eliminate. And here we see different agronomy reports of water infiltration rates, where we actually doubled the water infiltration rates. And that's one of the reasons why we saw such a difference here. Here's a 46% reduction in water. And you see these two trees here versus really the health of the tree should just tell you everything. The Kimonos trees were much healthier, much better off. And that's going to end up being a more long-term investment. And again, guys, I can go through all of these different results, and believe me, I would love to sit here for 3 hours and just talk in detail about every single case study and every single result we've got. But I promised you guys I would answer your questions, so I want to take a second here and see what questions I have. Uh, should I install the technology before or after the flowering of my crops? Good question. If it's a single flowering crop, like for example, if you have almonds or nuts or something like that that just basically blooms, or even citrus or those types of things that blooms once a year, and then after it blooms, you basically that's the fruit set you got. Then what you're going to find is the Kimonasi. If you can get our system on before the flowering, you'll see a more robust bloom and you'll have more flowers to begin with. So that will definitely increase your production by significant amounts. Now, if you happen to not be able to get this on before the bloom, you can still get a significant result. Now, the way our system will help you post bloom is by reducing flower drop and fruit drop. So when the plants get unhealthy, it will start to shed some of those flowers and some of those buds and some of those fruit if the plant genetically doesn't have enough energy to support all that fruit. So even after bloom, what you'll see is a reduction of loss that you normally would see if you have bloom drop or bud drop. So that can be a significant difference. So if you have grapes or if you have citrus or you have nuts and you say, well, my trees or my plants have already bloomed and they're not going to bloom again, you can still get a significant differential in terms of post-harvest yield just by the fact that the Kimonos system is going to help those plants generate enough energy to keep them on the vine and keep them on the plants and allow them to get to full fruition. The other things that you'll see as well is the sizing of the fruit will generally increase. Again, generally the trees will produce the largest fruit possible. So if you're looking for smaller fruit, you should see more fruit, and you have to do less thinning. If you see other types of fruit where you want those larger size like apples or oranges or those types of things, then if you leave them on the vine, which you should be, or on the tree, which you should be able to do, you'll see larger fruit, and that fruit will have more bricks. It will have a sweetness to it that you normally don't see. I don't know about you, but over the last 20 years, when I go to the supermarket and I pick an orange up, or I pick a tangerine up, or I pick different types of fruit up, a lot of times I'm disappointed because they're just not that sweet. They just aren't as sweet as they really should be or could be. And I get it that if you go to Walmart, a big mass store like that, you kind of say, well, they're just putting so much out there that's just not quality. But the Kimonos plant booster will dramatically increase that Brix rating and make that fruit taste sweet again. In fact, when we had some of our farmers send us some of the fruit that they have, it was literally twice as fruit as anything you'll ever find in the store. So you will see significant quality improvements, and you will see significant sizing improvements, and you will see less fruit and flower drop if you install our Kimonos plant booster after that bloom. But if you can get it in before the bloom, so now we're hitting April and May, a lot of these areas are you still have a little bit of time. Let's jump on this right now. Let's get this out to you and get it into your fields before they start to bloom. So that way you see the big bloom a lot of fruit, and you'll continue to see the energy needed to keep those products very healthy throughout the season. That's all I got, guys. I don't really see any other questions, but I wanted to get, once again, if you have other questions or want more information about how it works, please go to our website at harvestharmonics.com. Always get these calls. Whenever I do these presentations, I always get calls from farmers that I have to call them back, but that's fine. So again, guys, just go to our website, harvestharmonics.com. Check out the case studies, check out the in-depth science reviews, check out some of the blog articles. There's a lot of useful information on our blog. We try to give you as much positive information as you can so you guys can be successful. But at the end of the day, we really have to just really decide, what are we going to do? We have these challenges. Okay, we have high cost of fertilizer, we have the Russian Ukraine situation, we have fertilizer shortages in a lot of areas, and we have weather and the other problems that we always have every year. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? Are you going to just grin and bear it? Are you going to try to endure? Are you going to not grow a crop this year? Are you going to let people down? Or are you going to do something about it? Are you going to make your farm more efficient? Are you going to take me up on my offer? I back up everything with 100% money back guarantee, and I've never had to give the farmer their money back because my system always works and it always produces. So let's make your farm part of the future of farming today. Let's make your farm super efficient and super high tech so that you can have not only a leg up over your competition, but you can fulfill your job and your role in our society of feeding the people of Earth, providing better quality food, and getting us through these food shortages with minimal impact to human health. Because we're all here on one planet, we're all here as part of the human race, and we all need to work together so that we can all thrive and flourish and prosper. So I wish you guys all a very, very healthy weekend, and I hope you guys take advantage of our offers to really improve your farm this year, 2022 and beyond. Have a great, great day, guys, and we'll see you again next week.